Hi, folks. This is Abel James, and thanks so much for listening to the Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. Today's guest of the show is with a best-selling app and cookbook author, a former professional gamer, and actually my kitchen co-pilot, Miss Alyson Bridge. So she's going to be coming on in just a second. I wanted to make a few quick announcements before we have her on. The first is that we finally came out with an Android version of Caveman Feast, our best-selling app. So we're really excited about this. We've been working on it for months, and I know a lot of you folks have been asking for it. And we're stoked to say that in 3 markets right now, it's on the bestseller charts. On Google Play, it's top in health and fitness. It's top in cooking, I believe, on Amazon. And it's also top in food and drink on Apple. So if you haven't picked it up already, it's great for the holidays. Plenty of desserts in there, but lots of fat-burning recipes as well. They're all 100% paleo from my buddy George Bryant, who was on last week from Civilized Caveman. And it's called Caveman Feast. You can just Google it. It should come right up. Another quick announcement is that Alyson's first app just came out, and it's a bestseller on the Apple Store, which we're really excited about. It's all gluten-free desserts, and it's gotten great feedback so far. So thanks so much for your support and reviews so far. If you'd like some great treats for the holiday season, then you can pick it up on Apple. Right now, it's just on the Apple App Store. We don't have it ready for Android or the other markets quite yet, but we really appreciate your support. So if you're interested in that, it's called Gluten-Free Desserts from Fat Burning Man. All right, so on to the show with Alyson. We're going to be talking about how to survive the holidays without getting a Santa belly, eating around your food sensitivities, how to get fit by exercising just a few minutes a week, and tons more. All right, let's go get Alyson. All right, we're back with Miss Alyson Bridge. How's it going, Alyson?
I'm excellent.
Awesome. We got lots of friends coming over tonight. Right now it's Thanksgiving Eve. And what are we going to be doing tonight?
I haven't decided which treats yet, but definitely the raspberry shortbread thumbprints and some sort of pie. You might have input on that.
I'm pretty into that. And also we have some coffee here. It's been a long week. Actually, I was just filming for 2 days with Jonathan Baylor to support his new book launch, The Calorie Myth, which should be coming out right by January 1st. So check that out. And you were actually doing some cooking demos for that too.
That was
pretty
so
cool.
fun. Yeah.
We had a whole crew in this house, and it felt a lot smaller than normal.
It kept getting smaller too. It was like everyone kept spreading out in our space. You were like climbing over people.
Yeah.
It was a blast.
So I'm having a coffee. I don't usually do this. I advocate against it. It's past 3:00, but you know what? I deserve it, and it's the holidays.
Yeah.
That's what this is all about.
I feel like it's the weekend. It's only Wednesday.
I know. It's a little weird. All right. So why don't we just, I know that you were on the show before, and a lot of people have heard that, but for those who aren't familiar with who you are and what you do, why don't you talk a little bit about your story?
Okay, yeah. So I come from a big family. I'm the youngest of 7. I have 5 older brothers, and we grew up playing video games. So it was sort of a natural transition for me to become a professional gamer because I was, kind of beat up on when I was little by my brothers, all in good fun for them. Mm-hmm. And so when it came to video games, it was like even playing field. All of a sudden, I could just outsmart them, and it didn't matter that you have bigger muscles and you're 2 years older. I can make you
cut you down.
Cut you down, exactly. So I became a professional gamer and traveled around the country and parts of Canada competing in video games on a all-female professional video game. And after a few years, I started noticing from all the sitting on the couch and pounding Cheetos and Pringles that my butt wasn't looking so hot and my stomach was a little not as attractive as I would like it to be. Mm-hmm. And my skin was having a lot of issues. So I started paying a lot of attention to diet and exercise and trying different things. And I ended up actually running. It was like the cure that I thought. Everyone's like, you need to work out more. So I was like, okay, I'm going to hit the treadmill. And so I bought a treadmill, and then
I didn't know you bought a treadmill.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And then I moved away from that house, and I was in an apartment, and I started running 3 times a day. So I would run for an hour on the treadmill at my apartment gym in the morning, and I'd come home from work in the afternoon for lunch, and I would run for a half hour and eat really quick and go back to work. And then after work, I would come and run another hour.
Yeah.
And my dad, when I went home to visit, it was his response really that sort of shook me into like understanding that something that I was doing is not right. I got off the airplane and he said, "Alyson, you're too skinny." And it was this shock on his face.
Yeah.
And
it wasn't good.
No.
Yeah.
And he's always just like, "You're my little princess. Everything you do is perfect." So like to hear him say that, I was like, "Oh, I thought I was doing a good job, like trying to get in shape." But it was just, it's too much.
Yeah.
And for people to say that you need to run that much or run a lot or, you're fat because you don't move enough is wrong.
Yeah.
You can hurt your body in the opposite direction.
And it's horrible for so many reasons. Psychologically, it's taxing on your body. What you're doing is it's eating itself. Mm-hmm. It's very similar to what happened to my body when I was running marathons. Usually, I know a lot of you are familiar with this story, but right now I'm like 170. That's really healthy for me. And I was down to 148, but had higher body fat than I do right now. And so basically what happens when you run that much is that you're chewing up and eating all of your muscle, and you have so much cortisol, so much stress on your body that most people, unless you're doing exactly right, most people wind up not in the best of health with a suppressed immune system. And you start to look emaciated, and like some of the pictures of you around then are startling. I mean, you look skinny, but you look sick. Yeah,
it's not a good skinny.
Yeah. And so let's skip ahead to now. Mm-hmm. How do you work out now?
Now if I really want to like get into awesome shape, like I feel like I'm in awesome shape, but I could do a lot better by like doing more. But I've like been able to sustain and shape my body just by doing like, I work out probably once or twice a week, and sometimes it's only for a minute. Like I'll just pick up the kettlebell and like do some squats and presses and like lift it up and that's it. And then I'll do sprints another day of the week. Mm-hmm. And I also
not every week. I mean, you're not super strict about it.
I am not. And some week, I don't do anything at all except for, I try to be active by taking the dog on a walk. Mm-hmm. And I actually just started doing Qigong, which you sit in like these low poses. So they call it, it's like, it's your legs are out like this. Yeah. And you squat down and you hold it there for like 30 seconds to a couple minutes, and you do it for different stances. But that's actually, I found like, I like it, helps me push through that sort of like burning in your legs. It's a really good feeling. I like it. And my butt's been getting tighter even.
That's pretty cool. And so another cool thing is that Pedram Shojai was on the show not too long ago. He's become a good friend of mine, and we were actually out at Dr. Sarah Godfried's house, and she was a past guest as well. We were filming for a new documentary and a sofa series for like a web TV thing. And it's kind of neat. You're actually learning Qigong from Pedram's book and his DVDs and all of that.
He sent me his DVDs and his book, so I've been just like devouring. I love it.
It's so cool.
I'm really enjoying it.
So we're all learning all the time. But so compare how you felt and how you looked when you were exercising 3 times a day for like an hour on a treadmill to now.
Well, I look way better now. My skin is better. I was also eating wheat at the time, so I think that was also some of the impact in the different problems I was having with my skin and stomach and different things. But as far as just like purely physical, the way my body looked, I looked way too thin there, and I still felt like I had weight to lose, which is, I think a lot of people go through that. It's like kind of flabby, your skin's like hanging off of you because you're eating all your muscle away, and you look pale and kind of sickly, and you look thin even though you feel kind of fat. It's like this bizarre thing.
Yeah, it's like, it's a weird thing that happens, and it happened to me as well. It's like your body loses its shape when you're eating yourself and you're that skinny. It's like if you're a man, you're just kind of like a straight line, And if you're a woman, you're kind of like a straight line.
Yeah.
Whereas what each sex or gender wants is, you know, the man wants to be that nice triangular shape at the top and then straight at the bottom. And with
Girls
women, they
wanna
want
be
that
like,
nice hourglass shape.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you kind of, you can get a thin waist that way. But we were talking about this yesterday when we were filming. You don't get that ratio. And that's the thing that really makes you feel strong, makes you look attractive, gives you confidence. And now that's something that you have. And it doesn't come from over exercising. It comes from exercising smart.
Yeah, exactly. And the way to exercise, the smart way to exercise for me, and I think for most people, is short bursts training. So sprints and lifting heavy weights. And I remember when I was in high school, the weight training came up for whatever reason. And I got like afraid of weight training because you just see like, I don't know why our minds jump to like super tan bodybuilder women on TV, but that's immediately, I was like, I don't want to be that, so I'm not going to lift weights. And so I never lifted weights because it's sort of this like, I don't know, I don't think anyone tells you to be afraid of lifting weights.
I don't know how that
where
happened.
That came from.
Yeah,
but
it's
weights
bizarre.
are awesome.
Yeah, they're amazing. The bang for your buck is like you can do in minutes or even seconds what takes hours or never occurs by doing other types of exercise, because you're not really doing much of anything. You're not challenging your body to get to that minimum effective dose where you get that adaptation effect where you either grow muscle, restore muscle, or like you were saying before, tone muscle.
Yeah, and I love the feeling of when I'm working out with weights, like when I start to see and feel muscle in my body and see the like different shapes it gives me. Oh, it's the best. It's way better than being, skinny and not having muscle.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about what we're doing tonight. Let's talk about some of the lifestyle stuff, because I think this really is important for people to understand that it's not about thinking that you should make stuff sometimes and like learn how to cook and doing it occasionally. It's like literally every single night I eat dinner cold because Alyson is in there taking pictures of it, and we have to get the lighting exactly right. And it's really neat because this is something that you and I have started to live every single day, and I think it's totally cool. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So every night we make dinner of some sorts, and sometimes when I feel tired, you jump in there, and he's like,
Alyson cooks the vast majority of the time.
Yeah, and I like taking my time to some degree. Like I like recipes that are an hour long because it's like this process, this like meditative experience for me where I'm in the kitchen and preparing, and I just love it. But there's also like tons of recipes that you can do really quickly if you don't have an hour to cook in the evening. But and you like get in there and you're like 5 minutes. I don't know how you do it. You're like bam, 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 delicious. Like, I didn't even know we had those ingredients.
I'm like a short order line cook. That's the way. Actually, so it's really interesting. My dad cooked his way through college. He paid his way through college at UNH in New Hampshire growing up. I think it took him 5+ years to do it, but he literally became a cook and used that to finance his whole education. And he's continued to love cooking. And I know that, his love of cooking really kind of came into my own life without me knowing it when I was really young, and he was plucking parsnips from the backyard. Dad, you're probably listening right now. But and whipped them up in butter, and took fresh zucchini and squash in the backyard. And he always cooked in 5 minutes. That was his thing. And he could make anything. So it was like if we didn't have ketchup or something, he'd be like, don't worry, I'm on this. And he would make ketchup in 5 minutes. And I think I learned to appreciate that, and seeing that was possible as an example made me just have that confidence to go into the kitchen and do whatever. And, it doesn't always come out great, but usually since it's a process and there are principles that you can follow, say you have a green smoothie that tastes boring, then you can add stuff to it. You can add like little stevia to it, maybe a little bit of fruit, maybe some dates, cacao nibs, vanilla, whatever. And you can make it more interesting. Same thing with eggs. As long as you're not using flavors that are totally competing against each other,
Yeah.
you're going to be just fine usually. But so I don't do much baking, but you do. And there's a big difference between, like throwing a bunch of stuff in your scrambled eggs, or making, like liver and onions, and actually making a cake, especially without gluten. So you went from not really being a cook much at all to cooking some stuff, but it usually had gluten in it, to being a masterful cook without gluten. And just for those of you who don't really know, from a health perspective, we get into this in way more detail on other shows, but gluten is pretty gnarly. We suggest that most people avoid it. Yeah. But unfortunately, that's the thing that binds most baked goods together. It's the glue that holds it together. So when you take that out and you don't include it, it's really difficult to do those like culinary baking acrobatics.
Yeah.
So how do you do it?
Well, a lot of things I find you don't need it in things like cookies and brownies necessarily. So I can just use almond flour, maybe a little bit of coconut flour, and the egg seems to be enough to hold it together. For things like a lettuce crust on top of an apple pie, that's like, I was...
on top of a bacon apple pie?
Yes.
With bourbon over it? Okay, just wondering.
I didn't do the latest crust on the bacon bourbon apple pie, but only because I wanted to make it paleo and it's hard to make a latest crust paleo, which is why a little bit of tapioca or arrowroot powder flour, you can put that in there and it gives it that stickiness. I also found that for me, I like brown rice flour some. I know if you're like strictly paleo, then brown rice flour is just like the devil. Yeah. But for me, it's I found that you can replace it 1-to-1 for white flour, no problem in recipes. So,
it's a little like grainier. You can feel it on your mouth.
Yeah.
But it does work. Like it actually, like the recipe still works,
right.
Which is cool.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say, like in the app, I've made some, and if you I found that too, if you learn like how to make cookies, then just like playing and learning how to make a gluten-free or paleo cookie, then you can throw in stuff and make changes and play with it to make it your own, which is kind of what I've done to like make my recipes. And it's the same thing with like cooking at night. If you know how to make a stew or a soup, you just need to learn like one recipe for soup or stew, and then it's just like putting stuff in and seeing what tastes good and just like making adjustments. Same thing like you were saying with the omelet. You can just like and like a stir fry. There's like, it's so easy to cook for yourself, and you can make it really fast or really slow. But to go back to desserts, tapioca or arrowroot, but I wouldn't recommend using it very much or often, because it is really high glycemic and starchy. So just a little bit if you need it, if you need that stickiness to a recipe.
Yeah, you don't want to go overboard with that stuff.
No.
One of the coolest things that you do that you probably brought from your days being a professional video gamer is you're very playful in your approach to cooking.
Yeah.
Talk about that and why that's important.
Well, I think that you have to really enjoy the experience of cooking and whatever you do, because that's what makes it fun. And if you're having fun, you're going to want to keep doing it. And it becomes for me, like cooking in the evening for an hour, it's like playing a video game, because it's, I'm having fun. And that's what video games were for me. It's just, it's me having fun and playing around. So if you take that, whatever it is in your brain, I'm sure you have like a hobby or something, and there's some element to that that's really engaging for you. And if you apply that to cooking or health or whatever, and if it's point-based, where you're like, I need to make 5 recipes this week, and like make a little chart and check them off as you do it, make your objective list, then I think for me anyway, that's something that really resonates with me. And even I'm really competitive, and I think that comes from the 5 older brothers. Yeah. So I would even like make it like incorporate a competitive element of like, okay, I'm gonna make a better apple pie than Martha Stewart, and it's gonna be gluten-free. Like that's hard.
And then you do, and it's awesome. You put bacon in it.
And alcohol.
Yeah, this is hilarious. So her app came out, and I was scrolling down, and I saw that it's rated like it has mild. I can't remember what it said, like tobacco, alcohol, sexual, or something. I'm like, what is in that? What happened?
Like 12
yeah,
plus?
because it's like 12 plus, and the reason is because in some of the recipes, like the rum balls and the bacon bourbon apple pie, there actually is alcohol in it, which is fun to cook with, but we wouldn't recommend it for people younger than 12.
And they're optional too. Like
Yeah, that's true.
You can not use them and just put like a little bit of vanilla in. Like that'll work really well.
Yeah. So the competitiveness is really interesting, but I think
Excuse
even more interesting than that is the way that you cook, like you said, is a meditation. And I think the way that a lot of people think, especially in America, and I'm sure other countries too, but definitely where we are in our world, people think of cooking as an inconvenience. It's something that they want to do as quickly as possible and get out of there, right? But that mindset, and I mean, we do that sometimes too. Like everyone's busy. We're super busy.
Yeah.
Everyone's busy all the time. We don't have enough time. But the way that you do it is you basically reserve that time when you're cooking for your own meditation. You can do a similar thing with exercise, and that's what I used to do, and I ran a lot.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just me going out and exercising; it was me going out and working through thoughts and writing blog posts and relaxing. And that's what you do. So instead of saying that cooking is an inconvenience and it's something you need to do in 5 minutes or less, like me, what you do is actually reserve that time where, I usually don't go in there and bug you. I kind of let you do your own thing. I get out of your way, and you have the kitchen to yourself, except for the dog running around trying to trip you and asking for treats. And usually by dinner time, you're like totally relaxed and just in the zone. And I think there's a lot that people can learn from that, because cooking never used to be an inconvenience. It was something that like you did to nourish yourself, nourish your family, nourish your loved ones, your friends as well. And that's something that I think is kind of getting lost in the mix.
Yeah. I think too, in the same way, when you slow down and you're taking that time to cook in the kitchen, it also makes it so that when it's time to eat, you're already in that state of enjoying yourself and having fun and being playful, that when you eat dinner, you're able to savor and enjoy your food so much more. You're not stressed and rushed and like slamming your meal so fast that you're not like taking the time to appreciate what it is that you're eating.
So there are a lot of people who are listening who have heard the terms gluten-free and paleo. Some, I'm sure, know the difference, but a lot of people probably don't. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, well, paleo is no beans, no rice, no starches, no dairy. Gluten-free is more relaxed. So I know you don't have any problems with dairy. I kind of do, so I stay away from dairy, although
sometimes
cheese is just way too good.
Sometimes it's worth it.
It is worth
Yeah.
it. And for recipes that I want more like togetherness and like almond flour is just kind of coarse, I do like using brown rice flour.
Yeah.
And I like beans too sometimes. They don't seem to bother me, so I eat beans. I don't make any dessert recipes with beans. Although I think there is a brownie. You can make brownies out of beans.
Lentils or something.
Yeah.
I don't think we've done that. Maybe we will. Maybe in a few weeks
I actually
we'll come out
tried that one way back before I was paleo or gluten-free.
Yeah.
But I didn't soak them long enough, so they were like hard chunks of beans. Anyway.
So when it comes to gluten-free and paleo, the way that I like to think about it is that paleo is a great place to start if you want quick results or if you want to get back on track. It's usually more effective for fat loss, because what it does automatically is cuts out, all grains and most carbohydrates, most sugar, although there are ways around that. But if you're doing strict paleo, it cuts out most sugar as well. But it is much more restrictive, and it's harder to stick with that for the rest of your life. Yeah. Gluten-free, on the other hand, is something that if you just want to dip your toes into this lifestyle, it can be really useful, because it's taking out one of the most problematic substances that we have in food today, which is gluten. And also when you stop eating gluten, especially if you stay away from all those newfangled processed gluten-free foods, which I encourage everyone to stay away from that. But if you're staying away from wheat, let's just say that,
Yeah.
then you're automatically replacing most of your grains with something green, hopefully some fibrous veggie, or maybe a bit more protein or a bit more fat. And so that can be really effective for people who are just getting started. So gluten-free recipes, it's interesting because like the way that if we put recipes on Fat Burning Man or something like that,
Yeah.
they're gluten-free. They're not paleo most of the time. Every once in a while, they'll be like 100% paleo. But in my house, it's so interesting because we actually have to eat around our own food sensitivities. And for me, the reason that I'm not more paleo than I am is because a lot of paleo things, it turns out I'm actually very sensitive to. So specifically what those are olive oil, honey, which takes out the two, that's the main fat that most people use in paleo. And that's the main like sweetener that most people use. And so it makes it really difficult to eat 100% paleo because those are in almost everything. And then on the other hand, I do really well with dairy. That doesn't show up on my food sensitivity at all. And I don't find that I get puffy or digestive upset or anything else, like reduced performance. In fact, I feel pretty great when I have dairy. You're the opposite. So eating around our food sensitivities can be pretty interesting. Yeah. So talk about yours a little bit.
I end up sweetening a lot of our desserts with maple syrup because you have a sensitivity to
and because I'm from New Hampshire.
Yeah, you know all about the delicious maple syrup.
My family makes maple syrup. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. My sensitivities are dairy and actually chocolate. Which is sad.
I can eat as much chocolate as I want, and I do.
Why are you little? Yeah. So I end up using carob in a lot of my recipe, like my own, like when I'm trying to take my inflammation down to like zero inflammation if I feel like I'm getting.
But I'm sensitive to carob.
Yes. Why?
It's crazy.
It is crazy. But so like for olive oil, I will just use macadamia nut oil instead for salads. And instead of grapefruit, we'll have oranges.
Yeah. Grapefruit is another one. I'm like huge in the red zone on grapefruit, unfortunately.
We should test you again. That might have changed.
I'm testing again. The kit's actually right there. I'm going to be testing in a few
weeks. To test again for chocolate. They also said garlic, so I need to double check and see if
which I put in everything.
Oh, so good.
And so what happens? It's interesting because when I eat something that I'm totally reactive to, it doesn't seem to affect me right away. Maybe it does in the way that I feel, but not really. Even doing as much filming as I do, I can tell when your face gets a little puffy, like especially around your eyes. But with you, it's like much more obvious and it's almost instant.
Yeah, it comes like really quickly. Usually the next morning I can notice it, and it's like I'll get this line right here. And actually we were at a wedding. It was a few months ago, and there was these treats, and I thought, I never eat wheat. I'm just gonna. These just look so good, and they had so much like farm to table stuff. I thought, just like this one treat's gonna be fine, and I ate it, and the next morning my whole face was like really like puffy. Noticeably in pictures, I was just like, delete those off Facebook. This is terrible. But I think that I don't know if it's because I'm a female, I'm a smaller frame. Maybe my body's more sensitive to things I put in my body. Guys, they can get away with anything. That's what I think.
Almost anything.
Up to a point.
Up to a point. But yeah, it's even interesting. So we just got back from Brazil. One of my best friends just got married down there. And so we're eating a lot of foods where we didn't know necessarily what was in them. And a lot of times there weren't English menus or anything. So we tried to avoid wheat as much as we could, although I'm sure that it was in a lot of things. Yeah. One thing that happened to me when I switched to this way of eating what I call the wild diet, which is gluten-free but not 100% paleo. It's kind of like your own individualized eating plan, eating around your food sensitivities. When I did my switch, I believe I whittled it down to gluten that I used to have horrible canker sores. I remember I had the lead in my high school musical, at the same time that I was about to graduate in 3 years from high school and doing a bunch of sports and playing in a band, and I didn't even have enough time to sleep. And my mouth was full of like 15 different horrible canker sores.
the worst.
And I always struggled with that. My dad always did too. It was like something that we all just thought was part of, being who we were.
Yeah.
But as soon as I switched away from eating wheat, they pretty much like disappeared altogether. Although I have like 2 huge ones right now, which I'm sure are a direct function of eating not 100% squeaky clean while we were down there, combined with stress. And that's when you combine eating poorly with lots of stress and travel and that sort of thing, that's a recipe for disaster, and you're going to fall apart pretty quickly. But if you get your diet squeaky clean, then it's a lot easier to withstand some of the stresses that we all go through.
Yeah, I was the same way with cold sores. It was like I would get them all the time, like once every 2 months.
Since you were like 4 years old or something.
Yeah,
like
I remember when I was 8 years old. We were supposed to go to Knott's Berry Farm on some trip, and I had like 15 all over. It was like disgusting. I was like, I couldn't go to the trip, but I know, super sad. But once I stopped eating wheat, same thing happened. Like I get one every once in a while, and when I do get it, I'm like, I know exactly why. Like, oh, I didn't sleep for 3 days.
Yeah, sleep is a big one.
Yeah,
that's definitely a big one.
Your immune system goes way down.
Taking the red eye the other day didn't help, and then filming for 2 days straight either. We try to practice what we preach as much as possible, but even for us, it's very difficult. Now the diet is easy. That's the easy part. The lifestyle is sometimes the hard part.
Yeah, another thing about when I cut out wheat too, I had really bad skin. I just experienced a lot of skin problems all through high school and into my mid-20s. And like giant pores and a lot of acne. And it's such a frustrating feeling. I want to say as a female, but I'm sure it's frustrating for guys too. And it got so bad that I got laser therapy surgery, laser on my face. And it's super expensive and super painful. And it didn't really do anything. But when I cut out wheat, my face cleared up. I stopped getting cold sores. I would get since I was 11, I had this itchy, flaky scalp problem that was just like a constant issue my entire life. And I just thought, that's just something wrong with my body that I have to deal with. And all those years, and it wasn't my body at all. It's just my body's reaction to what I'm pretty sure is wheat.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because like what happens to me now is when we're traveling, and we know this because we've like been on cruises and like traveled all over the place, gone to Thailand, Brazil, and cheated quite a bit, and like, especially when you don't have an English menu and they bring you a bunch of food and like some of it is breaded or, has wheat in the sauce. There's just like nothing you can do really except for not eat it 100%. And one thing that I really like to do, and I like to encourage other people to do, is like when you're in a different culture, enjoy it, like value that. But it doesn't necessarily make you fat right away. If you bring back wheat, like I didn't really get fat or like put on a bunch of weight, and you didn't either. But like all these little things that used to be problems start to come back. The ones that disappeared, like you were talking about, like the flaky scalp, like that even happened to me a little bit. The canker sores, feeling a little bit sluggish, certainly digestive issues. And so that kind of comes first. You get like a little bit sick first. And most people don't think that represents being sick because everyone has those things.
Yeah.
But that's because most people are a little bit sick. And so once you experience feeling 100% squeaky clean awesome, it's ridiculous. And you kick yourself a little bit for when you fall off the wagon, but it's really easy to get back on. So what do we do when we get back home to try to get squeaky clean again?
One thing is that we'll eat make lots of green smoothies. Greens are so purifying and
restorative.
To your body. And spirulina and chlorella are really good, so I'll add those to smoothies to help clean out my system. And just like for me, like staying away from my inflammatory foods like chocolate and cheese. Although, I was just thinking, if I go like a certain amount of time without like foods that are bothersome for me, I can have them and it's not a big deal. I just can't do them all. Because I had chocolate last night and it's not like I'm fine.
Yeah, and that's more like a volume issue too, right? Like if you are super inflamed and your body can't handle it, and this happens pretty often, then you go on an elimination diet, usually for like 30 plus days, sometimes 6 months, maybe even years, and then you start to sub them back in small quantities, and you find that your body isn't quite as reactive, and that's awesome because it's showing that you're healing your gut. You don't have as much leakiness going on in your gut, and you're not getting as much inflammation, even if you do eat foods that are a little bit questionable for you. And this is really interesting because we were actually at Bill and Haley of Primal Palate at the Paleo royal wedding. And this is probably supposed to be a secret or whatever, but they actually had grass-fed ice cream, which was delicious. But it's so funny because we're all like paleo cooks and authors and stuff, and we're all like trying ice cream. And what's interesting is that, a lot of us, the authors and the bloggers kind of started around the same time, 2 or 3 years ago. And so we've gone 100% squeaky clean for a while, especially at the beginning. And then we started to test again. And most of us are foodies, and that's why we do this, because we love to experience food. And so what you're starting to see is a lot of people in the paleo community starting to veer off a little bit into their own way of doing this, their own diet.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think as long as you're doing like the majority of the time what works for you, that when you veer off and try things, it's just not a big deal at all. Like, and for us, like going to Brazil and Thailand and like doing the best we can, but they're cooking for us and we don't know what kind of oils or spices they're using. Using.
I know. MSG.
But it's not a big deal because like for us, since we eat so well all the time, that it doesn't have that big of an impact on us.
Yeah. Now we're coming close to time, but I'd love before we go to talk about this. You're such a great example of someone who has a lot of fun with what you eat, takes a lot of risks, and you're not afraid to eat some really weird stuff, which is what we do all the time. Every time we travel, we try to eat weird stuff.
Yeah.
So what is some of but it wasn't always that way, right?
No, I hated seafood till I met you.
Yeah. When she met me, our first date was at a sushi restaurant. That's where I decided to take her. And she's like, oh, I think you told me after the fact, which is really nice of you. She's like, oh yeah, I don't eat seafood.
I got the chicken.
Like, what? But, and I said, what? Because like, I'm a New Hampshire boy and we grew up, close enough to the coast and close to Boston. So it was all lobster. Every year we'd go to Maine, go camping and eat just fresh seafood the whole time. It was wonderful. So the idea that someone wouldn't like seafood is ridiculous to me. It makes sense because you were in Arizona. But. Yeah. But yeah, so you went from not even eating seafood to eating crickets, blood sausage.
Oh, blood sausage is so good.
Thalamus gland.
Oxtail.
Oxtail. It's so cool. So at our farmer's market, there's this wonderful guy who makes the most ridiculous and delicious artisan meats and pâtés and livers and blood sausage and smoked duck breast.
Oh, so delicious.
And what's cool is that you'll find that I think the majority of the time that we take risks with what we eat, the weirder the food, the vast majority of the time, it's better than you expected it is. Not worse. It's not like weird and disgusting. Even when you eat a cricket, it's not nearly as bad as you expect it to be.
It's just kind of weird, and there's legs.
Picking legs out of your teeth, that's a little weird.
Yeah, but like liver pâtés. There's just so many delicious foods that as Americans, or I don't know if it's the same internationally, but we just stay away from them entirely. And organ meats are delicious. You make liver and onions with like bacon and shallots and onion and garlic, and it's just like incredibly delicious. And when you look, Google like what's in liver, it's just a powerhouse of vitamins and minerals, and it's way more nutritious than the muscle meats. Yeah.
Yeah. And bone broth has become something that we almost always have, which is a lot of people hear that and they don't really know how weird it is. But what are you putting it?
So, if we have a chicken carcass on hand, I'll throw a chicken carcass in there. But I like to get
If there were dead bodies lying around, we'll just toss them.
Like meaty. You can get dog bones at the farmer's market from grass-fed cows for like
Don't tell baby.
$1 or $2 a pound. Sorry, baby. And so we'll get like the cheap dog bones or the marrow bones or meaty bones and put those in there. Mm-hmm. And chicken feet have like all kinds of little connective tissues and things which are really good for you. So
Be a collagen champion.
Yeah. Chicken feet and oxtail is also supposed to be incredibly good for you. So you just like load up this the crock pot with all these bones and feet, fill it with water, and like put a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in there and let it sit for 24 hours to 48, depending if there's a chicken carcass in there or not. And it is amazing. It's just like gelatin after you refrigerate it. Mm-hmm. You scoop off the fat, put the fat in the fridge for cooking with it, and
or dog treats
or
Abel treats.
And I'll drink it in the morning instead of coffee. And you can like right the day after you make bone broth, it's you can drink it straight with no spices, and the flavor is really mellow. And it just feels like you're nurturing every part of your body when you drink it. And then you just get this surge of power. I go do sprints afterwards, and I feel like I'm just like freaking superwoman, just like jamming down the dirt road. But then like a couple days later, it'll like start to taste a little funny. So you just load it up with like garlic powder and various spices.
Or you make a new batch.
You make a new batch.
that becomes the dog's batch after that point, usually, unless there's too much garlic in it.
Yeah, but bone broth rocks.
It does.
And you can notice like your skin getting like really smooth, and you'll like any like crinkly lines you have from smiling or whatever. Usually, all of a sudden you're like, wow, that all went away. Yeah. That's awesome. Good job, bone broth.
It is pretty sweet. Well, we're out of time. But I'm sure we'll have you back sometime soon. You can find Alyson's new best-selling app on the iPhone, iPad, and iPod portions of the App Store. It's called the Gluten-Free Desserts by Fat Burning Man. There are some other gluten-free desserts recipes. Just make sure it's from us. I know a couple of people have gotten confused about that.
It's a cupcake with a little cherry.
Yeah, exactly. Where else can people find you?
I have a blog. It's called glutenfreeeats.com. And time to time, I pop in on your website.
You do. And Alyson's also a featured chef in Fat Burning Chef, which is one of our cookbooks that's coming out very soon. So stay tuned for that. So Alyson, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
From a few feet away, but I'm really excited that you came on. I know that last time we had you on the show, people really loved it and wanted to have you back. So thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.